My son changed the locks on my own house while I was standing at my wife's grave. That's how I found out. Not a phone call, not a text. I drove home from the cemetery, put my key in the door, and it wouldn't turn. Stood there a full minute, thinking I had the wrong key. I didn't. My name's Leo Hawkins, 72 years old. Retired from Dayton Public Works 7 years back after 31 years fixing water mains and sewer lines for a city that never once said thank you, but paid the bills. My wife, Catherine, died 4 months ago, ovarian cancer. Fast, once it got bad. We were married 45 years. I buried her on a Thursday, and by the following Monday, my own son had a locksmith out to my house. His name is Daniel Hawkins, my boy. I taught him to ride a bike in the driveway of that house, taught him to drive stick in the church parking lot 2 blocks over, and 3 days after his mother went in the ground, he stood on my porch and told me the house wasn't mine anymore. "Dad, it's complicated," he said. "You and Mom put my name on the deed years ago, remember? For the refinance. Faith and I already talked to a lawyer. Legally, this is my house now." I remembered signing something. Catherine handled the paperwork, always did. She was sharper with numbers than me, right up until the end. I never once thought it meant I'd be standing on my own front steps like a stranger at 72 years old. His wife, Faith, stood behind him in the doorway, arms crossed, not saying a word. Didn't need to. Her face said it plain enough. "Get off our porch, old man." "Where am I supposed to go, Daniel?" "You can stay with us. Guest room's already set up. It's temporary until you get your feet under you." Temporary. I heard that word from a nursing home brochure once about my own father. He never left. The drive to Daniel's place in Westerville felt like more than defeat. It felt like disappearing. Every mile away from Dayton was a mile away from 45 years with Catherine, the kitchen where she burned every pot roast she ever attempted, the porch swing I built the summer Daniel turned 10. Gone. Not sold, just taken from a man old enough to be somebody's great-grandfather. Faith met me at the door with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Hope that's okay." It wasn't an office, it was a converted closet with a twin mattress on the floor and a folding table for a nightstand. Daniel's old trophies still sat on a shelf, like nobody bothered finishing the job before I showed up. First week, I told myself it was grief talking, told myself Daniel was handling his mother's death the only way he knew, by controlling something, anything. I gave him that. Catherine would have wanted me to. Second week, Faith started leaving notes on the refrigerator. "Please don't use the good towels." Third week, she started locking the pantry after dinner, said it was for the kids' sake, Nathan and Christopher, 7 and 9, good boys, my grandsons, but I noticed the lock only ever kept me out. Then came the letter. Faith handed it to me at breakfast, like she was passing the salt. Return address, a law office in Columbus. My hands weren't steady opening it. It was a formal notice informing me that under Ohio law, since I no longer held title to the Dayton property and since I was residing at my son's address with no lease agreement, I could be asked to vacate with 30 days' notice, same as any tenant off the street. 30 days in my own son's house after I gave that boy everything I had for 40 years. I looked up, and Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Faith just kept buttering her toast like she hadn't handed a 72-year-old widower an eviction notice disguised as a courtesy. That's when I understood. This wasn't grief. This was a plan, and it had been running a lot longer than 4 months. If this story's already got your blood boiling, that's exactly where it should be. Hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and stay with me.
2 weeks after that letter showed up at the breakfast table, I did something my wife would have called stubborn and my son would have called disrespectful. I drove back to Dayton without telling anyone. 40 minutes down 70, past exits I could drive blind after 3 decades, straight to the house on Brennan Street, our house. I sat in the driveway a long time before I got out, half expecting Daniel had changed the driveway too. The for sale sign was already staked in the front yard. 3 weeks since I'd been locked out, and my son had already put my house on the market. Mrs. Delgado came out from next door before I even made it up the walk. She's lived beside us since Daniel was in diapers, and she looked at me like she'd been waiting to say something. "Leo, I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but a realtor was through here Tuesday with your son. Older one, Adams was the name on her card. Catherine Adams. I didn't know a Catherine Adams. My wife's name was Catherine Hawkins, and hearing a stranger carrying her first name walking through her house with my son felt like a slap I didn't see coming. They said the place is already under contract," Mrs. Delgado said. "Cash buyer. Said it should close within the month." Within the month. My house sold, closed, and gone before I even had a chance to walk through it one last time, before I could stand in that kitchen and remember Catherine at the stove, before I could take down the mirror in the hallway where we'd marked Daniel's height every birthday in pencil, right up to the year he stopped growing. I called the number on the real estate sign from my truck. A woman picked up. Not Catherine Adams, an assistant, young voice, polite and rehearsed. "I'm calling about the Brennan Street property," I said. "I need to know who authorized the listing." "I can check that for you, sir. Can I get your name?" "Leo Hawkins. I own that house." There was a pause. Too long a pause. "Sir, our records show the property's held solely under Daniel Hawkins. I'm not able to discuss the transaction with anyone who's not on title." Not able to discuss it, like I was a nosy neighbor instead of the man who'd paid that mortgage for 22 years before it was ever paid off. I drove straight from that parking lot to a law office 2 blocks from the courthouse, one Catherine and I used years back for our wills. Old friend of mine still worked there. Christopher Kelly, semi-retired now, but he still took walk-ins for people he knew. I laid it all out for him, the deed, the refinance I barely remembered signing, the letter, the sign in the yard. Christopher didn't sugarcoat it. "Leo, if your name's really off that title and Daniel's the sole owner, he's within his legal rights to sell. Ohio doesn't require your consent if you're not on the deed. Now, if you were pressured or misled into signing, that's different conversation. That's undue influence. That's something a court could look at." "So he tricked me?" "I didn't say that. I said it's worth finding out exactly what you signed and when. Can you get me a copy of the original refinance paperwork?" I didn't have it. Catherine kept the important documents in a fireproof box in our bedroom closet, a closet that now belonged to my son and his wife, in a house I could no longer walk into. Christopher leaned back in his chair. "Then we start there, Leo. Get that box. Whatever's in it is going to tell us exactly how far your son went to take that house from you." I left his office with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not yet, but direction, a place to point all this anger. I drove back to Westerville that evening with one thing on my mind, getting into that closet before Daniel or Faith realized what I was looking for. I let myself in the side drawer, quiet, the way you do when you've spent 31 years learning which floorboards creak. Down the hall, past the boys' rooms, toward the office that used to be mine for exactly 6 weeks. The door was already open, and Faith was standing inside it, holding the fireproof box in both hands, like she'd been waiting for me.
Faith didn't flinch when she saw me. Didn't even set the box down. "Looking for something, Leo?" "Not Dad. She never once called me Dad, not in 5 years of marriage to my son. I should have noticed that a long time ago." "That's Catherine's box," I said. "I need what's inside it." "Daniel already went through it. Nothing in here that concerns you anymore." She held it against her hip like a woman holding a baby that wasn't hers to hold. "Faith, that box has our will in it, insurance papers, the original deed to that house before your husband's name ever touched it." "Had," she corrected me. Past tense. Daniel's the owner now. You should be grateful he's letting you stay here at all, considering how much this is costing us. Costing them. Like I was a line item. Like 40 years of raising that boy, working overtime so he could go to state school, co-signing his first car loan. Like none of that counted for anything against the price of a spare bedroom. I didn't raise my voice. Catherine always said I had a temper like a kettle, slow to heat, but once it whistled, everyone in the house knew it. I felt that whistle rising, but I held it down. Give me the box, Faith. She didn't. She walked past me, box still in her arms, and called down the hallway. Daniel, your father's home. Your father. Not my dad. Not even Leo. Handing me off like a delivery she didn't want to sign for. Daniel came up from the garage in his work clothes, grease still on his hands from whatever he'd been fixing on his truck. He looked between me and Faith, and I watched him choose a side before he even opened his mouth. Dad, what are you doing going through our stuff? Our stuff? That's Mom's box, Daniel. That's 22 years of paperwork on a house I paid the mortgage on with my own hands. It's handled. I talked to a lawyer. Everything's in order. Then you wouldn't mind if my lawyer takes a look at it too. That's when his face changed. Just for a second, a flicker, there and gone. But I'd known that boy since the day he was born, and I know what it looks like when he's caught. You got a lawyer? Christopher Kelly. My mother and I used him for our wills. He's requesting a copy of that refinance paperwork, Daniel. All of it. Every signature page. Faith's grip on the box tightened. This is ridiculous. We took you in, we fed you, and this is how you repay us, sending lawyers after your own son? I didn't send a lawyer after my son, I said. I sent a lawyer after whoever forged the reason my name came off that deed. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Daniel wouldn't look at me. Faith looked at Daniel like she needed him to fix something he clearly didn't know how to fix. That night I called my daughter, Emma. She'd moved out to Cincinnati years back, married, mostly kept her distance from family drama. Always said Daniel and I butted heads too much for her taste. But she picked up on the second ring. Dad, it's late, is everything okay? I told her everything. The lockout, the eviction letter, the house on Brennan Street, already sold, the box Faith wouldn't hand over. Emma went quiet on the other end. Then she said something that stopped my heart cold. Dad, I need to tell you something. Faith called me 2 months ago, before Mom even passed. She asked if I knew where you kept Mom's important documents in case, her words, something happened suddenly. 2 months before your mother died. Yeah. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought she was just being organized. 2 months. Catherine was still alive 2 months before that call. Sick, yes, but alive and still fighting. This wasn't a plan that started after the funeral. This was a plan that started while my wife was still breathing. Emma drove up from Cincinnati the next morning. Said she wasn't letting me do this alone. And for the first time in months, I didn't argue with one of my kids. We went straight to the Montgomery County Recorder's office in downtown Dayton, public building, marble floors that echo, the kind of place where nothing about your life is private once it's on file. A clerk pulled the deed transfer for Brennan Street, while Emma sat beside me, her hand on my arm like she was steadying an old man, which, fair enough, I suppose I am now. The transfer was dated March 14th. Emma went pale next to me. Dad, that's the day Mom went in for her second round of chemo, the bad one. She was so out of it that night she didn't recognize me on the phone. I remembered that day too well. Catherine in a hospital bed at Miami Valley, tubes running into her arm, barely able to keep her eyes open. I'd been there the whole shift, holding her hand while she drifted in and out. I never left that room, so how did she sign a deed transfer that same day? The notary stamp on the document read a name I didn't recognize, Aaliyah Snyder, licensed notary, Franklin County. Dad, Franklin County, that's Columbus. Mom was in a hospital bed in Dayton. She couldn't have signed anything in Columbus that day. We drove straight to the address listed under the notary's license, a small strip mall office next to a nail salon in Westerville, 15 minutes from Daniel's house. The woman at the desk confirmed her name was Aaliyah Snyder before I finished my sentence. I'm asking about a document you notarized in March for a Catherine Hawkins. She pulled up her log without much hesitation, like she had nothing to hide, which told me she probably didn't know what she'd actually been part of. Here it is, notarized March 14th, 2:30 p.m. Signer presented ID and signed in my presence. That's not possible, Emma said. My mother was in a hospital 40 minutes away at 2:30 that afternoon. I was with her. The color drained from the notary's face. Sir, ma'am, I remember this now. A man brought the documents in, said his mother was too weak from treatment to travel, and that she'd already signed at home. He just needed the notarization completed same day for a bank deadline. I never actually watched her sign. I shouldn't have stamped it that way, but he was so insistent, and he had her ID. What did he look like? I asked, though I already knew the answer sitting in my chest like a stone. Mid-30s, said his name was Daniel. Emma grabbed my hand. I don't think either of us breathed for a second. That's not a family disagreement. That's not overreaching in a moment of grief. That's a notary stamped on a document my dying wife never signed in that room, obtained by my own son 3 weeks before she died, using her ID while she lay in a hospital bed too weak to lift a spoon. Christopher Kelly didn't waste time when I called him from the parking lot. Leo, if what you're describing is accurate, that's not a civil property dispute anymore. That's forgery and notary fraud, and depending on how the estate handles it, it may cross into elder financial exploitation under Ohio law. I want that notary statement in writing today, before anyone has a chance to talk to her again. I looked at Emma. She looked back at me with the same expression I remembered the day her mother's test results came back bad. That look of a person standing at the edge of something they can't undo. Dad, we need to tell Helen. We need to figure out what we tell Daniel's brother-in-law's family, and whether Bradley, She caught herself, shook her head, tried again. We need to decide what happens next, because once we report this, there's no version of this family that goes back to normal. I already knew my answer. I'd spent 4 months disappearing quietly in other people's houses. I wasn't disappearing anymore.
I filed the police report myself, sat across the detective's desk at the Washington Township station, and said out loud for the first time the sentence I'd been avoiding for a week. I believe my son forged my late wife's signature on a legal document while she was dying. The detective took it seriously the second Christopher Kelly walked in with the notary's written statement and the hospital records showing Catherine's location that afternoon. 2 days later, a financial crimes detective called Daniel in for an interview. I wasn't there for that conversation. Emma told me Daniel came home that night and didn't say a word to Faith for hours, just sat in his truck in the driveway, engine off, lights off, for almost 40 minutes before he came inside. The prosecutor's office took the case. Forgery, plus a count tied to Ohio's elder financial exploitation statute, since the transfer happened while Catherine, and by extension I, qualified as a protected class under the law. Christopher said it was one of the cleaner cases he'd seen in that category, because the timeline did most of the work. A dying woman 40 minutes away can't sign a document in a strip mall in Westerville. Daniel took a plea, avoided prison, but he's got a felony record now, 5 years probation, restitution ordered, and the sale of Brennan Street got frozen and unwound before it ever closed. The house came back to me. Every dollar Daniel had already spent from the almost sale, he now owes back. He called me once from a number I didn't recognize, probably a burner or a friend's phone. Left a voicemail. Didn't ask how I was doing, just kept saying he never meant for it to go this far, that Faith pushed for the notary shortcut, that he panicked about money after his hours got cut at the shop. Excuses. I've buried a wife and nearly lost my house to my own son, and what I got at the end of it was an explanation about his work hours. I moved back into Brennan Street the week the sale reversal went through. Walked through that kitchen for the first time in months. Catherine's oven mitts still hung on the same hook, the pencil marks on the hallway wall, Daniel's height, birthday after birthday, still there, untouched, because whoever staged that house for sale hadn't gotten around to painting over them yet. I stood in that hallway a long time, tracing the pencil lines with my finger. Age 6, age 9, age 14, the year he passed me in height and never let me forget it. I don't know if I'll ever let him back into this house. I don't know if I'll ever call him son the same way again. But I know this. I'm not disappearing in anybody's spare room. I'm not paying rent to exist. I'm 72 years old, and I buried the only woman who ever made this house feel like home, and I am done letting anyone convince me that grief makes an old man easy to move around like furniture. Emma comes by most Sundays now, brings her kids. We sit on the porch, the one Catherine and I picked out together 30 years ago, and I don't talk to an empty chair anymore. I talk to my granddaughter about her spelling test. I talk to Emma about nothing in particular. Just being there, in the house I fought to keep, is enough. Daniel hasn't been back. Maybe someday, maybe not. Either way, I'm still standing in the only place that ever mattered, my own front door, key turning smooth in the lock, nobody's permission required.